Ethan Mitchell had everything that looked like a perfect life, and Laura Mitchell believed she was living safely inside it. To the world, they were just another quiet couple in a peaceful neighborhood, sharing routines, smiles, and a marriage that raised no questions. But beneath that ordinary image, something was already moving in the shadows. Long before police lights flooded their street, long before investigators uncovered the truth, the foundation of their marriage was silently cracking. What began as a normal life would soon transform into a chilling story that proved how easily trust can hide the unthinkable. Ethan and Laura Mitchell looked like the definition of a stable married couple. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where houses lined the streets in perfect rows and nothing ever seemed out of place. Their home was modest but well-maintained, with trimmed lawns, clean windows, and lights that turn on and off at the same time every day. Neighbors often saw them leaving for work together in the mornings and returning in the evenings without any signs of tension. There were no loud arguments, no police visits, and no rumors circulating about trouble inside their home. Their marriage appeared calm and predictable. Weekends were spent running errands, attending family gatherings, or staying indoors away from attention. They were not overly social, but they were polite and friendly when spoken to. People described them as private, responsible, and emotionally mature. Photos shared online showed smiles that looked genuine, capturing holidays, birthdays, and small moments that suggested comfort and trust. Everything about their life fit neatly into the image of a normal, functional marriage. Inside the house, routines ruled their days. Meals were prepared at the same time. Household chores were evenly shared, and expenses were carefully managed. There was a sense of order that made their life appear secure. Nothing about their behavior raised concern or curiosity. Even close relatives believed Ethan and Laura had found a rare balance that many couples struggled to achieve. Yet beneath this smooth surface, something was quietly shifting. It was not dramatic or obvious enough to draw attention. It existed in small pauses, unspoken thoughts, and changes too subtle to name. The comfort that once filled their home was slowly being replaced by distance, though no one could see it yet. What looked like peace was actually the calm before a storm, hiding the beginning of a story no one could have imagined. As the months passed, small changes began to settle into Ethan and Laura's daily life, almost unnoticed at first. Laura slowly pulled away from the routines she once enjoyed. She stopped attending neighborhood gatherings and made fewer visits to family members. Her energy seemed lower, and she spent more time alone inside the house. To outsiders, it looked like nothing more than stress or exhaustion, something many people experience without concern. Ethan, on the other hand, became increasingly restless. He started leaving the house late at night, claiming he needed fresh air or time to think, and often returned after the streets were quiet and empty. Their schedules no longer aligned the way they once had. Meals were skipped or eaten separately, and shared activities quietly disappeared. The house, once filled with a sense of balance, now felt strangely divided. Bills continued to be paid, and appearances were maintained, but subtle inconsistencies began to form. Unfamiliar charges appeared on credit statements, and small withdrawals were made without explanation. None of it was dramatic enough to raise alarms, yet the pattern was slowly changing. Friends who checked and noticed Laura seemed distracted and guarded. She laughed less and avoided deeper conversations. Ethan remained polite and composed, but his patience appeared thinner. The warmth people associated with the couple began to fade, replaced by something harder to define. There were no arguments witnessed, no obvious conflicts, only a growing silence that settled between them. Inside the home, tension existed without words. Doors closed more often. Lights stayed on in separate rooms late into the night. What once felt like shared space now felt carefully separated. These shifts were easy to dismiss as a normal phase of marriage, but in reality, they marked the beginning of a slow unraveling. The cracks were forming quietly, preparing the ground for something far more devastating than anyone. The night everything changed arrived without warning, wrapped in the same quiet routine that defined the neighborhood. The street was still, with porch lights glowing softly and no sign that anything unusual was about to happen. Inside the Mitchell home, the evening passed without any disturbance that neighbors could hear or see. Hours later, flashing emergency lights suddenly cut through the darkness, reflecting off nearby houses and drawing curtains open along the block. The calm environment turned tense in seconds. Laura was found unresponsive inside the house, her body cold and still by the time help arrived. Paramedics worked quickly, but soon confirmed there was nothing they could do. The news spread rapidly among first responders, and the realization that a death had occurred inside such an ordinary home left everyone unsettled. There were no signs of struggle, no broken furniture, and no forced entry. Everything inside the house looked exactly as it had on any other night. Ethan was present when authorities arrived. He appeared shaken, disoriented, and unable to offer clear answers about what had happened. He stated that Laura had not complained of feeling unwell earlier, and there were no known medical conditions that explained her sudden death. At first glance, the situation appeared tragic but uncomplicated. Investigators considered the possibility of a medical emergency or an undetected illness. As the house was examined, nothing immediately stood out as suspicious. Doors were locked, windows intact, and personal belongings untouched. Neighbors told police they heard no arguments, no unusual noises, and saw nothing out of the ordinary that evening. The scene offered no obvious clues, only silence and unanswered questions. What seemed like a heartbreaking accident began to take on a heavier weight. The lack of explanation made the situation feel wrong. While the neighborhood mourned, investigators quietly noted details that didn't quite fit. In the days following Laura's death, investigators began a deeper examination of the evidence, and the first major shift in the case came from the autopsy results. Medical examiners determined that her death could not be explained by natural causes. Toxic substances were discovered in her system, substances that should never have been present. This finding immediately changed the direction of the investigation. What was once treated as a tragic loss now became a potential crime. Detectives returned to the Mitchell home with renewed focus. Cabinets, drawers, and storage spaces were carefully searched. During this process, several prescription medications were discovered that had never been prescribed to Laura. Some were partially used, while others appeared recently purchased. Investigators also noted that these substances matched what had been found in her body. The connection raised serious concerns about how and why Laura had access to them. Digital evidence soon added another troubling layer. Phone and computer records revealed online searches related to toxic substances, dosage information, and how certain chemicals could affect the human body. These searches were conducted in the weeks leading up to Laura's death. At the same time, investigators reviewed security footage from nearby homes. One camera captured Ethan leaving the house late at night shortly after Laura's death, carrying a small bag that was never recovered. Despite the growing evidence, Ethan continued to cooperate, maintaining a calm and controlled demeanor. He denied any knowledge of the substances and insisted there was no reason for harm. However, the physical and digital evidence told a different story. The lack of forced entry, combined with the toxicology results, pointed strongly towards someone inside the home. Each discovery tightened the focus of the investigation. What had once appeared to be an unexplained tragedy now showed signs of planning and concealment. As investigators continued their work, attention shifted toward the couple's financial life, an area that had remained hidden behind a carefully maintained appearance. Bank statements, credit reports, and loan records were examined in detail. At first glance, everything looked normal, but a closer review revealed a troubling pattern. Ethan was carrying significant personal debt that had never been shared with friends or family. Multiple credit cards were close to their limits, and several payments were overdue. The financial pressure had been building quietly for months. One discovery stood out more than all the others. Laura's life insurance policy had been modified shortly before her death. The coverage amount had been increased substantially, and Ethan was listed as the sole beneficiary. The timing of this change raised immediate concern. Investigators confirmed that the update occurred only weeks before Laura died, during the same period when the suspicious online searches and unusual spending began. Further analysis showed that some of the increased expenses were connected to purchases made without Laura's knowledge. Cash withdrawals and transactions suggested preparation rather than coincidence. Investigators began to believe that the financial strain was not sudden, but long-standing, and that the insurance policy represented a possible solution to Ethan's growing desperation. Friends and relatives expressed shock when questioned about the couple's finances. No one recalled Ethan ever mentioning money problems. Laura was known to be cautious and organized, making the sudden insurance change even more suspicious. The idea that financial survival could outweigh a human life was difficult to accept, yet the evidence kept pointing in that direction. With motive now clearly emerging, the case took on a sharper edge. The investigation no longer focused on how Laura died, but why. What had seemed like a stable marriage now appeared to be built on secrecy. As the investigation progressed, authorities began re-examining the people who had been closest to Ethan and Laura, this time with a clearer understanding of what might have been happening behind closed doors. Friends, co-workers, and extended family members were asked to reflect on past interactions, and small details that once seemed insignificant suddenly carried new meaning. Several people recalled changes in Ethan's behavior over the past year. He appeared increasingly tense, easily irritated, and emotionally distant, often speaking about feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities without ever explaining why. Laura's behavior, when viewed through this new lens, also raised concerns. Some co-workers remembered her becoming quieter and more cautious, avoiding attention and keeping personal matters strictly private. She had slowly withdrawn from conversations about her home life, offering vague explanations when asked about stress or exhaustion. There were moments when she appeared anxious for reasons no one could understand at the time. These recollections suggested that Laura may have sensed danger but lacked the clarity or support to act on it. Investigators also uncovered a pattern of control that had gone unnoticed. Ethan managed most of the household decisions, from finances to daily schedules. While this had once been seen as practicality, it now appeared more restrictive. Laura's independence had gradually diminished, replaced by dependence masked as routine. There were no reports of physical abuse, but the emotional imbalance became increasingly clear. Ethan's behavior after Laura's death was also reinterpreted. His calmness, once viewed as shock, began to seem calculated. He showed little visible grief over time and focused instead on practical matters. This emotional distance further strengthened investigators' suspicions. The image of a loving marriage was now fully dismantled. What remained was a portrait of quiet manipulation, growing pressure. The moment of arrest came quietly, without drama, but its impact was enormous. Authorities moved forward only after assembling a detailed timeline that connected every piece of evidence. Toxicology reports confirmed deliberate poisoning. Digital records placed the suspicious searches squarely before Laura's death. Financial documents revealed mounting debt and a clear financial incentive. When combined, these elements formed a narrative that investigators believed could no longer be explained away as coincidence or misunderstanding. Ethan was taken into custody as the investigation shifted into its final phase. The news traveled fast through the neighborhood, stunning those who had once considered him an ordinary, reliable presence. People struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the allegations now attached to his name. The same calm demeanor that once reassured others now felt unsettling, as if it had always been a carefully worn mask. As the case became public, media attention intensified. The story spread beyond the local community, drawing national interest. Analysts focused on how easily warning signs had been overlooked and how a seemingly normal life could conceal such a calculated act. The case sparked conversations about hidden control, emotional isolation, and the dangers of judging relationships only by their appearance. During legal proceedings, the evidence was presented methodically. Each document, record, and forensic finding reinforced the same conclusion. The lack of forced entry, the presence of toxins, and the financial motive all pointed in one direction. What had once been a mystery now appeared disturbingly clear. For the community, the arrest marked a painful turning point. The house that once symbolized stability became a reminder of betrayal. Trust was shaken, and the belief that terrible crimes only happen elsewhere was permanently broken. The truth, when it finally surfaced, the case reached its final stage with a verdict that brought legal closure but left lasting emotional damage behind. After weeks of evidence and expert testimony, Ethan was convicted, confirming what investigators had uncovered piece by piece. The courtroom decision marked the official end of the case. Yet for those affected, the impact was far from over. Laura's life was reduced to evidence and timelines, a tragic reminder of how quietly danger can exist within familiar spaces. In the aftermath, the community struggled to return to normal. The Mitchell house stood empty, a silent symbol of trust broken beyond repair. Neighbors who once believed they lived in a safe, predictable place now viewed their surroundings differently. Ordinary routines felt fragile, and the assumption that stability could be easily recognized was gone. The case forced many to reflect on how little is truly known about the private lives of others. Laura's story became more than a single crime. It highlighted the risks of emotional isolation and unseen control within relationships. Experts used the case to discuss how manipulation does not always leave visible marks, and how warning signs are often dismissed when a situation appears normal on the surface. The absence of obvious conflict had allowed the danger to grow unnoticed. Though justice was served, it could not restore what was lost. Laura's death remained a powerful lesson about the limits of appearances. What seems calm may hide pressure, and what looks stable may be built on secrecy. This marriage did not fall apart in chaos or public conflict. It ended quietly, reminding everyone that the most unthinkable events can emerge from the most ordinary lives.